Oliver Tarney and Rachael Tate are the sound supervisors on 13 Lives. I'm Matt Noble of Gold Derby, and I wanted to start off by asking you guys, and we'll kick things off with Oliver, how does sound tell the story in this film?
Yeah, I mean, other than the obvious thing of, the rain is basically the antagonist. It's there to, create the situation that traps the boys. So other than the sort of obvious ones, I think we really wanted to, we spoke to Ron early on, and we really wanted to lend the audience an idea of what it could be like, to let them have some sort of removed, albeit, but some experience of what it'd be like in the cave. So we spent a long time trying to sound design elements that would give the viewer some sort of idea of what it'd be like, and looking into the properties of sound and how it behaves in water. Is that reduced frequency thing, because you're registering sound through bone conduction rather than hearing it, so you don't have the top end that you'd expect, and then also because sound travels so fast underwater, it's 4.5 times faster than in air, you can't get that same calibration of how far away something is, or spatially where it is. So we really played around, and we kind of flipped on its head that usual thing now in a modern cinema array, or even at home. We can have very accurate idea of where a sound's coming from. It's one of the uses of sound in cinema is to say, look at that side of the screen, look at this side of the screen, by having a sound slightly louder than the others. And we kind of flip that on its head, and just so even if you see something in picture that's happening on one side of the screen, you kind of hear it from all around, and you don't always understand exactly where it's come from. So it becomes a little bit interactive, that the audience are actually having to look for on the screen what it was that you just heard. So it becomes a little bit disconcerting, which is kind of the point. And the sort of dumbing down of the senses that you would have in that environment, or the truncating of those senses, was a big part of trying to understand how difficult it would be. You have the stimulus of the silt and the current, which we obviously registered with sound as well. But we really kind of played with that idea that you were very unsure of where everything was in that environment. And I think that subjectivity was a big part of why the film worked in those sequences.
Rachael, anything you want to add?
Yeah, well, part of that idea of placing the viewer in that world was to be 100% as authentic and descriptive as we could be with the crowd as well, because as you know, 17 different countries provided 5,000, I think it was more than 5,000 volunteers and engineers from all over the world. And so we had to make sure that we represented that as much as we could. I recorded 8 different languages of crowd. I couldn't afford all 17, but we did 8. And they were perfect. They did very technical lines, because as you see in the background, they're always doing quite technical things. They're not just standing around having a cup of tea. Everybody's working. And we threaded these lines in, so you'll hear a little bit of Swedish at some point, and then a bit of German, a bit of American, and English, Australian. It's all interwoven based on what the most like top 8 countries that were there. I picked the top 8 and represented those because that's all I could do. And then the Thai, of course, in the camp full of local Thai people, they spoke a very specific northern Thai dialect. So we made sure we recorded crowd that live actually really near the cave. And it's all part of that authenticity that Ron's desperate for. And quite rightly, we had to get it right, because it's the Thai story. It's their story. So we can't just shove anything in. It had to be exactly right for this film.
It was also, the sort of contrast between part of that sound design that we did for the underwater was that reduced top end, so everything felt much more mid frequencies, and that was a great contrast between above ground, where you had all these languages, all the dialogue going. You've got the scooters going around, you've got the puddles with all the tires going through, everything, and sizzles of food. Everything was quite toppy deliberately and quite frenetic. And then we had this kind of much more rolled off, controlled, isolated sound in the cave. So you just felt that even though the whole world has pulled together to try and help, once you're down and you're 2 hours down a underwater tunnel, you're kind of on your own. So it was a great storytelling device to use.
Yeah, and it does go from that frenetic energy to that more like sort of isolated space. And I think because like when they're in the caves, going through the tunnels underwater, like that, there's no dialogue. There's no just a really interesting sort of sound that has to come together and all these different elements that I went through. I rewatched some of them yesterday and just closed my eyes to hear what the sounds were that were happening. And it's really interesting, the creaking and the water bubbles and the breathing and the music coming and going. You wanted to speak about how you created that sort of sound of being in that cave when you're sort of limited in the sounds you can use, but there's a lot of sounds that are coming together.
Yeah, part of it was the thing I spoke about before with that idea of spatially that it wasn't so direct, and in a way it was a useful tool. You could, even though everything was sitting in a similar frequency range because we took off the top end, and everything was diverged, so you didn't have that clarity of knowing where every sound was coming from. It meant we kind of had to make the choices of what you need to hear. So you had to become quite disciplined. So sometimes, we definitely were favoring one thing over another, but the cadence of the breathing was a huge thing, whether there was an experienced cave diver who knew to limit their body movement and not use up their air supply too quickly, oxygen supply, they would definitely move in a much more controlled way. Whereas the divers that were more used to open water swimming there'd be a certain amount of anxiety there just because they're not used to that claustrophobic space, and they were definitely getting through their oxygen quicker, which happened in real life. They did burn through their oxygen and get caught in the cave. So definitely the cadence of the breathing was a big one. The tank scrapes, when we played it to the real divers to get feedback on does this feel real or not, one thing they just said was more tank clangs, and the scuba tanks, whether it's above water or in the water, just that sort of is a big bulky thing, and normally when you get in water you feel everything's floating again, so you feel a little bit more elegant. But with these tight caves, everything's scraping along, and I think that sold again that with you hear a lot of scrapes before the back end of the film, and that sort of heightened the danger of the boys as they carried out have the masks on, and a wrong move and you scrape the mask off, and that's they're not going to be in a good wave. So you can sort of understand more for the divers the anxiety they would have felt at the very end there in terms of how this precious cargo, how careful they had to be with it.
And we had conversations with the production recordist Paul Brinkat right at the start of the shoot that we wanted to try and record all those underwater shots and use whatever we could get from them. And he was really great. We tested out these hydrophones, which are microphones that can go underwater. And he had one very near to the camera, or even attached to the camera sometimes, all the time. But sadly, it picked up wine, which was the water filtration. They had filtration system on all the water, and that current is obviously pushed around by huge pumps. So it was a sort of wee all the time. So that was useless, sadly. But it does mean that you can be guaranteed that anything underwater is 100% sound design, built from the ground up. There was nothing we could use.
Yeah, quite a challenge. It was good, a lovely challenge to have, but still, a blank canvas is a wonderful thing to have, and a lot of pressure as well. Every department before us had absolutely delivered in such an incredible way, and you're at the back end of the whole process, and definitely you realise that we had to deliver as well, and not let everyone else before us down, which they definitely had delivered.
Mm.
Yeah, imagine being sound people. Often you can either you could have the potential to ruin something that's come together well because it doesn't sound right so good, but you also have the opportunity to maybe fix things or salvage things that haven't come together quite well. Talking about sort of maybe the challenges, this is a whole film about sort of there being a problem of these 13 boys trapped in a cave and people needing to come up with a solution. How do we get them out when it seems like it's sort of impossible? The stakes are not as high when making a film, but as sound guys, do you need to also sometimes come up with problems that it doesn't seem like there's a solution to? And was there one in this film?
There's always a solution. It just takes time. Normally, sometimes you've got.
I was going to say the Kima idea, that solution of being able to so he has this magical box that combines two sounds to create a new third sound. And the original idea was that, you know, when they grab rope in the cave, when they're underwater, you just get a big vat of water, and a Foley artist will grab some rope underwater and we'll just record that. But the problem with that is you're limiting what you can do with that sound.
Lack of control.
Lack of control. So if you want it slightly drier, so you can focus on it more, or
more diffuse, or tighter.
Yeah, and so having the ability to blend between rope and water to make watery rope or ropey water was really useful, and that was extrapolated over.
That was everything that was tactile in the film was done that way, with dry sounds just recorded in air and then made to sound like they were in water. And we had reference files that we'd done in a scuba tank, and various things that we'd done in the cave initially. But we had to try and just keep working at it until it sounded exactly like that. It's quite a niche box that does these tricks, but in that instance it absolutely delivered. Yeah, it took quite a few days for each diving sequence to get the sort of tactile things, but it did. And in the end, we actually got a recording session with John Valanthan, maybe 2/3 of the way through the process for us. And, you know, we're excited about doing it. You know, the guy was incredibly humble and good at his job, and very generous with his time. And we got some fantastic recordings with him, and we got them back with the hydrophones underwater and microphones above water. And we A/B'd it against all the elements that we designed, and it kind of worked perfectly. So, we were very happy that everything combined well. So it's a mix of the real John Valanthan that was recorded in a cave, and then the sound design that Mike Fenton and I made up.
And actually, goes to show how good he was, that he did lots of breathing and efforts for us, and we were able to use that on Colin Farrell as he's swimming. So the real John is the fake John is the real John. There must be a
That's so cool. That's so cool. This is such an incredible story. It's obviously, people don't know the film is based on a true story of the Thai boys, the 13 boys who there was a rescue of them from a cave they got caught in after some monsoon. What did you two find the most incredible thing about this story? I'll start with Rachel.
I have to say that it was revisiting the story. We had seen it on the news at the time. We knew the kids got out. We assumed they would dived out, but we didn't know that they were actually put under, story giveaway if no one's seen it yet. They were actually given ketamine and taken out, tied by their wrists and ankle, and it's just an incredible story. But the thing I love most about it is these 5,000 people who just showed up for free, just because they had to help. They all just had to help. Some people just came to give food to everyone, food from their stalls nearby that they could have sold for money. They just were there for the whole time, feeding everyone. Even there was a hairdresser set up to give all the divers haircuts and stuff. It was just it's so heartwarming to see all these people from around the world coming together for one thing and getting it done by working together, and being able to sort of manifest that with the crowd recordings. It was really nice. That's the big part of the story that I enjoyed the most.
Oliver?
No, I was going to say the specifics of the how they got them out for me was just the same thing. It was just extraordinary to actually see it. I think we all followed it, but to see that was unbelievable. And again, the same other note, which was in such a world that we live in today, seem to have so many polarized views. To see something, the whole world coming together to try and achieve the same thing was really heartwarming.
Now, we're an awards website at Gold Derby. We love our awards, and you are both past Oscar nominees. Oliver, I think you've been nominated 4 or 5 times in the past, and you were both nominated together 5, I thought it was. And you both were nominated together for 1917 for the sound editing category. So what has that recognition from the Academy? Yeah.
There you go.
Very close.
Yeah, thanks. What's the recognition meant? It's lovely. It's such an honor.
Yeah.
And I'm a huge fan of Gold Derby, by the way. I have to say that. This might sound like I'm brown nosing. It's true. It's always on a tab on my laptop. I love it. And you guys were very pro 1917, so thank you. You usually get things pretty right. So.
Oh yeah, I think I picked it for Best Picture, but it didn't pan out.
Just I guess to get a nomination in these circumstances is that's voted on by your chapter, which is your peers. So it's to have any recognition from your peer group is always very it's a humbling thing.
Is there? So it's interesting, the sound category, right? Because it used to be split into sound mixing, sound editing at the Oscars. And it has changed now to just one combined sound category. Are either of you a little bit annoyed that the last year it was split was the year you were nominated together for 1917, and 1917 won the other sound award? So if they're being combined,
Bye.
I remember going out in the break, and there was the other side of the Ford versus Ferrari team, who I know, and we're all kind of just standing there going, "Huh, okay."
That was a weird one.
But the lines are so blurred now between, particularly in the post-production side, between editorial and mixing. We do some mixing is part of what we do. Obviously, the mixer is accountable for that at the end, and they do some editorial side. So it's a very blurred thing now, and it's fine. I think the Academy have done the right thing by combining them.
I think it's been about a decade since we did pure editing and no mixing. So it's, and vice versa, they do a bit of editing. Yeah, totally. And even people who are in the sound chapter watching the film, you can't tell if the mixer did one thing or the editor did it, and so it's not fair to split them in our minds. But
particularly when for winners the voting opens up and people from all branches are voting for winners at the Oscars, and it'd be like maybe a sound editor or mixer might be able to tell the difference, maybe, but like good luck anyone that works in any other field being able to pick that up.
Yeah, so I think every category is probably a bit like that, but certainly a director or a editor in on the picture side would have a very good idea, and I guess that's for other categories, and production designers and cinematographers would know, they'd have a better idea about the specifics of each other's work if they saw it. But it can be a bit like that, I guess. It's a slightly odd thing once it goes open for every category, probably.
I would say when I look at best hair and makeup, for example, I don't know if something set in the present day wouldn't be of a better skill level than something on a costume drama, but because one's more obvious to us that we vote for that, and costume, hair and makeup, it's tricky for us to vote for.
Just a quick question: what do each of you look for if you're voting for awards in sound?
Hopefully something a little bit different, something more nuanced. I think just something that to be honest, something that makes you a little bit nervous almost, where if somebody does the same job as you and you see it and you suddenly go, okay, and they've just gone up another notch in terms of for that type of project, and you sort of go, okay, fine, they've just raised the bar. Next time I do something like that, that's the next thing to kind of meet, which is what you're expecting to see, something in this, something specific really that for our part in sound editorial certainly, and then the mix, the overall really, that you just see that each part of the craft has come together really well and feels like a cohesive unit, that it's not doesn't feel too disparate, that you feel like there's some sort of quality to the overall which feels together.
And it's also that thing, they always think of movies as visual medium, but it's there's so many. I read the other day there's 1 billion people out there with some sort of vision impairment. So for all those people, sound is really important, and for all the others, it should be as well. And so I just think if you can close your eyes in a scene and listen to it, like you said you did, and you're in that world, that's what we want. Not, oh, there's some pretty VFX, whoosh. It has to be a whole experience, and that's what we try to do, and we try to keep it natural, don't we?
Normally, I think for us anyway, to try and keep it very authentic, even if it's a designed sound, to make it feel like it could have been real.
Yeah, and if I spot ADR in a film that I know is ADR because it stands out, that's a no-no. So
yeah. And that's so people are like, taught this the dialogue that was recorded after, right? Yeah, very good. Guys, it's been so great talking today. Oliver and Rachel, thank you so much for your time. All the best of luck with the Oscars and other awards down the pipeline for 13 Lives. And yeah, thanks. People watching this interview can go to goldderby.com and check the latest awards odds and join discussions in the forum. I know you'll be there, Rachel.
Yes, vote for us. Woo!